The date is October 24th, 1929, a Thursday. On the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, grown men are weeping. The sound you hear is not celebration. It is panic, raw, primal panic. Fortunes built over decades are evaporating in minutes. By the closing bell, 16 million shares have traded hands, a record that will stand as a monument to devastation. But this is only the beginning. Within days, $30 billion will simply cease to exist. Wealth vanished into thin air. And nearly 80 years later, on a Monday morning in September 2008, the same terror will return. Different faces, different technologies, but the same ancient human folly. This is the story of two crashes that redefined the world. Two moments when the illusion of eternal prosperity shattered against the rocks of reality. Two cascading failures that proved we learn our lessons slowly if we learn them at all. What you are about to hear is not fiction. Every detail, every figure, every consequence is drawn from the historical record. This is what happens when speculation becomes religion, when greed becomes policy, when the warning signs are ignored until it is far too late. Let us begin in the 1920s. America is roaring. The Great War is over. The soldiers have come home. Technology is exploding. Automobiles are rolling off assembly lines in Detroit. Radios are bringing entertainment into every living room. Electricity is lighting up cities from coast to coast. The stock market is not just rising, it is soaring. In 1924, the Dow Jones Industrial Average sits at around 100 points. By September 1929, it will touch 381, nearly quadrupling in 5 years. Everyone wants in. Farmers, teachers, shop clerks. People are borrowing money to buy stocks. They are buying on margin, putting down just 10% and borrowing the rest. Why not? Stocks only go up. That is what everyone believes. That is what the experts are saying. Irving Fisher, one of the most respected economists in America, declares in early October 1929 that stock prices have reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. Permanently. That word will haunt him, but in that moment he is merely echoing what the entire nation wants to hear. The boom will never end. Prosperity is the new normal. The Federal Reserve has kept interest rates low. Credit is flowing like water. Investment trusts, the predecessors of modern mutual funds, are multiplying. They are using leverage, borrowing to amplify returns. Some trusts are even creating other trusts, pyramiding debt upon debt. It is a house of cards built on a foundation of optimism and borrowed money. But beneath the surface, cracks are forming. Agricultural prices have been falling since the early 20s. Farmers are struggling under debt. Income inequality is widening. The top 1% of Americans are earning nearly a quarter of all income. Consumer spending is beginning to slow. Inventories are piling up in warehouses. Industrial production peaks in June 1929, 3 months before the crash. But few notice. The market keeps climbing. Speculation has become disconnected from fundamentals. Stock prices are no longer reflecting the actual value of companies. They are reflecting hope, belief, the greater fool theory. Buy now, sell to someone else for more tomorrow. September 3rd, 1929, the market reaches its peak, 381.17. Then it begins to slip. Slowly at first, a point here, 2 points there. Investors are not worried. Corrections are normal, healthy even. But the selling continues. October arrives. The decline accelerates. On October 18th, the market drops significantly. Margin calls go out. Investors who borrowed to buy stocks are being told to put up more cash or their positions will be liquidated. Many cannot. On October 23rd, another sharp drop, 6% in a single day. Anxiety is building. Then comes Black Thursday, October 24th, the day we began with. The market opens and selling overwhelms the floor. Prices are collapsing. Panic is contagious. By 11:30 in the morning, the market is in free fall. A group of powerful bankers meets at the offices of J.P. Morgan and Company, Thomas Lamont, Richard Whitney, and others. They pool their resources and begin buying stocks aggressively, trying to stabilize the market. It works, temporarily. The market recovers some losses by the close. But the damage is done. Confidence is shaken. Friday is calmer. Saturday, the market is closed. Sunday, families gather. Some are counting their losses. Others are still hoping this is just a bump. Monday, October 28th, shatters that hope. The market plunges 13%. It is the worst single-day percentage decline in history to that point. And Tuesday, October 29th, is even worse. Black Tuesday, another 12% drop. The ticker tape, which prints stock prices, cannot keep up. It runs hours behind. Investors are selling blind, not knowing the true prices of their holdings. The volume is staggering, 16.4 million shares. The machinery of finance is breaking under the strain. In the weeks that follow, the market continues to fall. By mid-November, the Dow has lost nearly half its value from the September peak. But this is not the end. This is merely the opening act. The market will continue declining with occasional rallies that give false hope until July 1932. By then, the Dow will sit at 41.22, down nearly 90% from the peak. 90%. Entire fortunes gone. Companies that seemed invincible, bankrupt. Banks that held those stocks and made those loans failing by the thousands. Between 1930 and 1933, 9,000 banks will fail. 9,000. When a bank failed in that era, there was no deposit insurance. Your money simply disappeared. Families lost their life savings overnight. The money supply contracted. Credit froze. Businesses could not get loans to make payroll or buy inventory. They laid off workers. Unemployment, which was around 3% in 1929, climbed to 25% by 1933. 1 in 4 workers jobless. Those who kept their jobs saw wages slashed. Consumer spending collapsed. Demand dried up. Factories closed. A vicious cycle fed on itself. The crash on Wall Street metastasized into the Great Depression. The human cost was staggering. Bread lines stretched for blocks. Shanty towns, called Hoovervilles after President Herbert Hoover, sprang up in every major city. Families lost their homes. Children went hungry. Men who had been pillars of their communities were reduced to selling apples on street corners. The psychological scars ran deep. An entire generation would emerge from the 30s with a profound distrust of the stock market and a compulsion to save every penny. The Depression reshaped American society, led to the New Deal, created Social Security, and fundamentally altered the relationship between government and economy. And the crisis did not stay within American borders. The international gold standard linked economies together. When American banks failed, they called in loans from Europe. When American consumers stopped buying, global trade plummeted. The Depression went worldwide. In Germany, The economic chaos helped fuel the rise of Adolf Hitler. In Japan, it contributed to militarism and imperial expansion. The Second World War, which would claim 60 million lives, had many causes, but the global economic catastrophe of the 30s was certainly among them. Decades pass. The lessons of 1929 are absorbed. Regulations are created. The Securities and Exchange Commission is established to police markets. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation insures bank deposits. The Federal Reserve learns, or so we believe, how to manage monetary policy to prevent such disasters. The post-war boom transforms America into an economic superpower. The 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, each decade brings growth, with occasional recessions, but nothing like the 30s. The stock market becomes a wealth-building tool for millions. Retirement accounts, mutual funds, pension plans, all tied to equity markets. But memory is short. The safeguards are gradually relaxed. In 1999, the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated commercial and investment banking since the Depression, is effectively repealed. Banks can now take deposits and gamble with them in ways that had been forbidden for nearly 70 years. Financial innovation accelerates. Derivatives, complex instruments that few fully understand, proliferate. And in the housing market, something is stirring. Home prices in America have always risen modestly, roughly tracking inflation over the long term. But starting in the late 90s, they begin rising faster, much faster. By the mid-2000s, housing prices are soaring at double-digit annual rates in many markets. Las Vegas, Phoenix, Miami, California, everywhere you look, prices are climbing. A house that cost $200,000 in 2000 is worth $400,000 in 2005. People are buying homes not to live in, but to flip. Buy, wait a few months, sell for a profit. It is speculation, just like the stock market in the 20s. And the credit is flowing. Mortgage lenders are handing out loans to anyone with a pulse. No income verification, no down payment. Subprime mortgages, designed for borrowers with poor credit, are multiplying. Adjustable rate mortgages with teaser rates, 2% for the first 2 years, then adjusting to 8 or 9%, are everywhere. Borrowers are taking them assuming they will refinance before the rate resets, or that their home will appreciate so much they can sell for a profit. The banks making these loans do not care about the risk. They are not holding the mortgages. They are bundling them into securities and selling them to investors. This is securitization. Take 1,000 subprime mortgages, bundle them together, slice them into tranches, and sell them as mortgage-backed securities. Rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, are stamping these securities with AAA ratings, the highest possible grade, as safe as Treasury bonds, they claim. Why? Because the agencies are paid by the banks creating the securities. Conflict of interest is baked into the system. Pension funds, insurance companies, foreign governments, everyone is buying these mortgage-backed securities, believing they are safe. They are not. Wall Street goes further. They create collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, which bundle mortgage-backed securities together. Then they create synthetic CDOs, which are essentially bets on whether other CDOs will pay out. It is leverage upon leverage, derivatives upon derivatives. The big investment banks, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, are all in deep. They are using enormous leverage, borrowing $30 or $40 for every dollar of capital they hold. Small movements in asset prices can wipe them out, but they are making billions in fees and bonuses. The incentive is to keep the party going. The Federal Reserve under Alan Greenspan keeps interest rates low after the dot-com crash and the September 11th attacks. Easy money fuels the bubble. Some people warn. A few economists, a handful of investors, point out that housing prices are disconnected from incomes and rents, that the lending standards are insane, that the derivatives are a ticking bomb. They are ignored or mocked. Greenspan testifies to Congress that the financial system is sound, that innovation has spread risk and made the system more resilient. He could not be more wrong. In 2006, the music stops. Housing prices peak and begin to fall. At first, just a slight decline. But for the millions of subprime borrowers with adjustable-rate mortgages, the resets are hitting. Their payments are doubling or tripling. They cannot afford them. Defaults begin to rise. Foreclosures increase. More homes flood the market. Prices fall further. Homeowners who bought at the peak now owe more than their homes are worth. They are underwater. Many walk away, mailing the keys to the bank. Strategic default. The foreclosure wave builds. The mortgage-backed securities, those AAA-rated instruments, start to fail. Investors realize they are not safe at all. They are toxic. No one wants to buy them. The market for these securities freezes. Now the banks have a problem. They hold trillions of dollars of these securities on their books, marked at face value. But if no one will buy them, what are they really worth? Mark-to-market accounting rules require banks to value assets at current market prices. If the market price is zero, the banks are insolvent. In March 2007, New Century Financial, a major subprime lender, files for bankruptcy. It is a warning shot. In June, two hedge funds run by Bear Stearns, heavily invested in mortgage-backed securities, collapse. Bear Stearns injects $3.2 billion to bail out one of them, but it is not enough. By August 2007, credit markets are seizing up. Banks stop trusting each other. The overnight lending market, where banks borrowed to meet daily cash needs, freezes. The Federal Reserve begins emergency lending to keep the system functioning. But the crisis is spreading. In September 2007, there is a run on Northern Rock, a British bank. Depositors line up for blocks to withdraw their money. The Bank of England has to step in. In December, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and other central banks coordinate to inject liquidity into the system. It is not enough. The cancer is too deep. January 2008. Bank of America announces it's buying Countrywide Financial, the largest mortgage lender in America, which is on the brink of collapse. March 2008. Bear Stearns, one of the oldest and most prestigious investment banks on Wall Street, fails over a weekend. The Federal Reserve arranges a shotgun marriage with J.P. Morgan Chase, lending $30 billion to facilitate the deal. Bear Stearns stock, which was worth $170 per share a year ago, sells for $10, later reduced to $2. Shareholders are wiped out. The government and Federal Reserve hope that this will be the end, that the crisis is contained. It is not. The summer of 2008 is tense. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the government-sponsored enterprises that guarantee half of all mortgages in America, are teetering. Their stocks are plunging. In July, the government takes over both companies, effectively nationalizing them. Shareholders are decimated. Taxpayers are now on the hook for trillions in mortgage guarantees. September 2008, the dam breaks. On the weekend of September 13th and 14th, frantic negotiations take place in New York. Lehman Brothers, another storied investment bank, is out of money. The government refuses to bail it out. No buyer emerges. On Monday, September 15th, Lehman Brothers files for bankruptcy. It is the largest bankruptcy in American history. $600 billion in assets. Gone. The same day, Merrill Lynch, facing a similar fate, agrees to be bought by Bank of America in an emergency deal. The next day, Tuesday, September 16th, the government reverses course and bails out AIG, American International Group, the largest insurance company in the world. AIG has sold billions of dollars of credit default swaps, insurance on mortgage-backed securities. If AIG fails, every major bank in the world will take massive losses. The government injects $85 billion. It will eventually rise to $182 billion. The financial system is now in cardiac arrest. The commercial paper market, where companies borrow for short-term needs like payroll, freezes. Money market funds, considered absolutely safe, are breaking the buck, falling below $1 per share. Reserve Primary Fund, a major money market fund, collapses because it held Lehman Brothers debt. Panic is everywhere. The stock market is in free fall. The Dow drops 500 points, then 700, then more. Credit is gone. Banks are not lending. Companies cannot function. On September 19th, the Treasury Secretary, Henry Paulson, and the Federal Reserve Chairman, Ben Bernanke, go to Congress. Bernanke, a scholar of the Great Depression, tells lawmakers that if they do not act, there will not be an economy on Monday. Not a damaged economy, no economy. Congress passes the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, authorizing $700 billion for the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP. The government will buy toxic assets from banks, inject capital, do whatever it takes to prevent total collapse. But the damage is done. The crisis metastasizes into the real economy, just as it did in the 30s. Credit freezes. Businesses cannot get loans. They lay off workers. Unemployment, which was around 5% in early 2008, will climb to 10% by October 2009. 8.7 million jobs lost. Household wealth, tied to home prices and stock portfolios, evaporates. Americans lose $16 trillion in net worth. $16 trillion. The foreclosure crisis peaks in 2010 with 2.9 million foreclosure filings. Entire neighborhoods become ghost towns, filled with empty homes, overgrown lawns, broken windows. The American dream of home ownership becomes a nightmare for millions. Consumer spending collapses. GDP contracts at an annual rate of 8% in the fourth quarter of 2008. It is the worst quarter since the Great Depression. The auto industry, already struggling, nears extinction. General Motors and Chrysler require government bailouts to survive. And again, like the 30s, the crisis goes global. European banks had gorged on American mortgage-backed securities. They are now insolvent. Iceland's entire banking system collapses. The country goes bankrupt. Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Greece all face sovereign debt crises. The euro itself is threatened. Global trade plummets. Developing countries dependent on exports to the West suffer. Riots break out in multiple countries. Governments fall. The social and political consequences ripple for years. The rise of populism, Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, the resurgence of nationalism, all have roots in the economic trauma of 2008. So here we stand, looking back at these two catastrophes. 80 years apart, different technology, different financial instruments, but the same fundamental dynamics. Both crashes were preceded by speculative bubbles fueled by easy credit and leverage. Both featured widespread belief that this time is different, that the old rules no longer apply. Both saw warnings ignored and skeptics dismissed. Both involved financial innovation that was poorly understood and inadequately regulated. Both featured conflicts of interest where the people supposed to provide oversight were compromised. In 1929, investment trusts used leverage to amplify returns. In 2008, banks used securitization and derivatives. In 1929, people bought stocks on 10% margin. In 2008, people bought homes with zero down. In 1929, the Federal Reserve kept rates too low for too long, then raised them too late. In 2008, the same pattern repeated. In both cases, inequality had reached extremes, concentrating wealth at the top and leaving the majority vulnerable. In both cases, the euphoria of rising asset prices blinded people to the underlying fragility. And in both cases, the aftermath was devastating. Jobs lost, wealth destroyed, lives shattered. The 1929 crash led to the Great Depression, which lasted a decade and required a world war to fully end. The 2008 crash led to the Great Recession, the worst downturn since that depression. Millions lost their homes, millions more lost their jobs. The recovery was painfully slow. It took years for employment to return to pre-crisis levels. Many never fully recovered. The policy responses differed. After 1929, the initial reaction was inaction. President Hoover believed in limited government intervention. The Federal Reserve actually tightened monetary policy, making things worse. It was not until Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal that aggressive government action began. After 2008, the response was swifter. The Federal Reserve cut rates to zero and engaged in quantitative easing, buying trillions in bonds to inject money into the economy. The government bailed out banks, though this was deeply unpopular. Fiscal stimulus, though arguably too small, was enacted. These actions prevented another Great Depression, but they could not prevent significant pain, and they created their own problems. The bank bailouts bred resentment. Main Street saw Wall Street rescued while they lost their homes. The perception of unfairness, that the rich and powerful play by different rules, became entrenched. Institutions eroded. The political system became more polarized. The social contract frayed. What have we learned? The history tells us that humans are susceptible to manias, that when asset prices are rising, we convince ourselves it will continue forever, that we ignore risk in the pursuit of reward, that we use debt to amplify gains, not fully comprehending how it will amplify losses, that financial innovation, while it can create value, also creates complexity, and complexity hides risk, that conflicts of interest corrupt gatekeepers, that regulators are often captured by the industries they regulate, that inequality leaves societies vulnerable, that when the crash comes, the pain is not evenly distributed. The wealthy, who gained the most during the boom, have resources to weather the storm. The middle class and the poor bear the brunt. We have also learned that crashes are not just economic events, they are social and political upheavals. They reshape societies, they topple governments, they can lead to extremism and war. The Great Depression helped cause World War II. The 2008 crisis contributed to political upheavals whose effects we are still living through. The stakes are not just dollars and cents, they are the stability of civilization itself. And yet, despite these lessons, despite the regulations put in place after each crisis, the cycle repeats. Why? Because memory fades. Because new generations arise who did not live through the pain. Because the incentives for those in finance favor short-term gains over long-term stability. Because politicians are lobbied to relax regulations that are seen as burdens on growth. Because when times are good, warnings seem like pessimism, even defeatism. Because it is human nature to believe that we are smarter than those who came before, that we have figured out how to avoid their mistakes. But we have not. The two crashes we have examined prove it. The details differ, the names change, but the patterns remain. Boom, bubble, bust, euphoria, panic, despair, leverage, collapse, contagion. These are not anomalies. They are features of the financial system as it is currently structured. Until we fundamentally change the incentives, until we design systems that prioritize stability over speculation, until we ensure that those who take risks bear the consequences rather than passing them to taxpayers, the cycle will continue. The crashes of 1929 and 2008 are not just history, they are prologue. The next crisis will come. Perhaps it will be in real estate again, perhaps in corporate debt, which has grown to record levels, perhaps in a new asset class we cannot yet imagine. But it will come. And when it does, we must hope that the lessons of the past have been learned, that the guardrails hold, that the response is swift and just, that the pain is minimized and shared fairly. Because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. Another Great Depression would destroy countless lives. In a world with nuclear weapons and climate change and geopolitical tensions already running high, the destabilization could be catastrophic. We have been lucky, in a sense, that the crashes we have experienced, though devastating, did not break the world completely. Next time, we may not be so lucky. So remember October 24th, 1929. Remember September 15th, 2008. Remember the breadlines and the foreclosed homes. Remember the bankers weeping and the families shattered. Remember that prosperity is fragile, that what goes up can come down with terrifying speed, that greed, left unchecked, devours everything, and that the price of financial stability is eternal vigilance. These two crashes teach us that markets are not perfectly rational, that they are driven by human emotions, fear and greed, hope and panic, that they can become unmoored from fundamentals, that they can destroy as well as create, and that when they fail, the consequences extend far beyond Wall Street, beyond the wealthy, to every person, every family, every community. The greatest risk is not that we forget the specifics of these events. The dates, the numbers, the names will be recorded in history books. The greatest risk is that we forget the lessons, that we forget why regulations were created, that we forget the human cost of letting speculation run wild, that we forget that markets need rules, that capitalism needs guardrails, that freedom without responsibility leads to catastrophe. 1929 and 2008 are warnings across time. They are telling us what happens when we ignore fundamentals, when we let debt grow too large, when we allow inequality to widen too far, when we trust that prices will always rise, when we believe this time is different. It is never different. The details change, the patterns remain. The question is not whether another crash will come, it is when, and whether, when it does, we will have learned enough to prevent it from becoming another 1929, another 2008, or something even worse. The answer lies not in prediction, but in preparation, in humility, in remembering that the lessons of history are written in the losses of millions, and that forgetting them does not free us from consequences. It only ensures we will face them again.